Before we start this video, a large thank you to Hal, a name I unfortunately can't pronounce. Thank you for your support, Andrew, Inar, and Florian for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello guys, and today we're going to make our class system in our character creation screen. So what I have on screen here now is from our project Nephilim that me and Rob are working on. So if you see here, we're able to select the classes and the stats change, and it changes the gear of the character. So if you're coming here from the Dark Souls and Unity series, you're good to go. If you're not, this will still work for you. You just won't be able to assign gear because I'm using the gear system from that tutorial series. Okay, so let's start off by going here to the canvas, and let's go over to our middle background, create a new empty game object, and call it class list. And I'm going to go up here to the center transform, hold Alt, make it the size of the panel, and then bring it down to about 2/3 of the way. And then I'm going to actually make another empty game object here. I'm just going to call this classes, and I'm going to make it the full size of the panel by hitting Alt, and there it is, and I'm going to drag class list inside of that. And I'm going to make one more empty game object under classes, under class list, and I'm going to call this class information. I'm going to drag it above there. I'm going to make it the full size of the panel and then drag it up until it's on the line of class list, which is right here. You can tell when it turns gold. Okay, so the top panel is going to be for our class information, and the bottom panel will be for our actual class list. So I'm going to add a vertical layout group here on the class list. I'm going to set it to middle center, and I'm then going to add a button. I'm going to mess around with the dimensions of this button until it looks kind of like how I want it to look. A tip if you're actually trying to make this UI look nice, at least in my opinion, is to keep all the buttons a similar size so it looks like it matches. I am not going to do that right now because I'm just showing you the concept of how to do this, so it's not too important for me. I'm going to change the font size though so I can actually see the word there so it's legible. And I will actually mess around with the buttons height a little bit just because I'm a stickler. Okay, that looks fine. So I'm going to show you guys two class buttons here. I'm going to make one called Night and one called Naked. So I'm just going to rename this one Night class. And then I can actually duplicate that now and name this Naked class. So if you know how to do one, you'll know how to do them all. I'm just doing two so I can switch between them and you guys can see it changing on the screen. The logic will be the same with however many you want to add. And I'm just, for the sake of the view of it, I'm going to make the spacing minus, we'll say 525 maybe. Yeah, that looks better. You probably won't need to do this because I'm going to assume you're going to have more than two classes on your screen, so the list will be a bit more populated. Alright, now under the class information, I'm going to add a UI image. I'm just going to call this background. And I'm just going to set this to a frame icon that I have. I'm going to make this the full size here of the box, make it a little bit smaller. So it's just like right there in the center. And this is just, again, for of it looking nice. This is not a necessity. I just like adding a background to things. It kind of separates it, gives it a split look. I would set it to slice, but as you can see, I didn't slice this image. I forgot to, so we'll leave it at that for now. And now that that's done, we're going to want to go up here now where we have the background, and we're going to want to assign a layout group of sorts onto it. So I'm just going to use a grid layout group for what I want to do. And the idea of this is because we're going to put the stats up here. So your strength, your dexterity, etc., etc. So I'm then going to create an empty game object. And the thing is, as you can see here, is I can't actually adjust the size of this game object. And that's because with a grid layout group, I'm just going to call it strength stat, you have to actually set the size in the layout group component. So I'm going to put the strength icon here now, and I'll show you what I mean. As you can see, I can't stretch the image at all. But if I were to go back to where the layout group is itself, you'll see a thing called cell size. So I'm just going to change the values here a little bit. So I'll try 150, and it's fine at 100 for the height. I'll go back now and see if that's enough room. And I'm not liking that, so I'm going to make that a little bit wider. I'm also going to click preserve aspect on this image so it's not stretched. Now I'll come back here again, and I'm going to put it to middle center first off, and then I'm going to try putting it at about 250. The idea is I want to be able to get a number to the left of this image. Yes, now I can drag the image over to the far left side of this empty game object, and then I have on the right side a space for the stat number itself. So make it text, make it the size of the box, and then drag it over until you get that little gold line there so it's the other half of the box. And I'm going to make the size about, we'll try 25 first, see what that looks like. We'll make the text white so we can see it. Yeah, we need to crank up the font size a bit. 52 seems fine. And I'm only going to do, again, two of these. I'll do strength and dexterity because the logic is the same for all the stats. And if I were to punch in 10 stats, I'd be here for a while doing the same logic over and over again. So I will do two to demonstrate to you guys how it works. I'll put the dex icon here. If you guys are wondering where to get these icons, I believe it's in the stat video on my Dark Souls series. I link them in the description. Now, let's go over and minimize all this, and let's create an empty game object out here, and I'm just going to call this class selector. And I'm going to assign a script to this, or create a script rather, and I'm going to call this class selector. So this is where we're going to handle assigning our stats, our gear, our weapons, etc. And I'm going to take a sip of tea. Okay, so let's make some comments now to really highlight what we want to do. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to want a set of stats for each class, and then we're going to want a set of gear for each class. So, and with this information, then we want to assign those stats to the character, and then assign the gear to the character. So we'd say set the stats and gear of each class. That's pretty straightforward. So let's start with the first one. A set of stats for each class. Now you could make public int health for night class, public int, dexterity for night class, etc., but that's a lot of repeat variables there, and just a whole lot of integers. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make another script. I'm just going to call this class stats, and we're going to make it serializable, which means we can use it in the inspector, and we can actually create copies of these. We're going to get rid of the mono behavior, and then we're going to basically have all the stats you want to have in here that your character would have. So if you're going by souls, vigor, stamina, or endurance, whatever, dexterity, strength, intelligence, faith, etc., put them all in here, whatever stats you want to use. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to use strength and dexterity again, because if you know how to do one, you can do them all. I'm just going to give you a couple just to show you what it's like. So first, I will put down a public string, and let's call this player class. Let's be the class name. And then I am going to make a public int, and we'll call this the class level. So this is the total level of class we'll assign to you. If you don't have a formula to calculate that is, you can just use something like this. And then I'm going to have a text area thing here, and I'm just going to put down a public string for the class description. So this would be something if you want to give the class a neat little description. I believe that every class in Souls has one, you can say something for the knight, something for your sorcerer class, etc., And then finally header the class stats here. So I'm going to use public int strength level, and then public int dexterity level. Okay, so now that's all good. We save it. We think here if we need anything else. I'm just going to put a comment here just to show you you can do vigor level. You can do stamina level, your faith, intelligence. You get it. You don't need to stop with just these two. So now that we have that here, I'm going to put in my namespace here, I believe, because we're going to be utilizing some of the scripts from the Soul series. So if you're not following the Soul series, don't worry about the namespace thing. I'm going to put a header here on class selector called class starting stats. And then I'm going to make a public class stats, which I can't do without putting in my namespace. Namespace SG. There we go. Now, I'm going to make a public array of type class stats, which is a script we just made. And since this is serializable, we can actually use all those variables we put into that script in the inspector, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just going to call this class stats. Now, if we save that, and we go to the inspector in the scene where the script is, you can see we have this here. And let's make 2, because we have 2 classes. So we change the 0 to 2. I think you'll see element 0 and element 1, but if I change the player class to some things like knight, you'll see it actually changes from element 0 to knight. If I change this to naked, it changes from element 1 to naked. So now it's very easy to read in the inspector, and it's very handy. So you can just assign some levels here. I'm just going to put in some random levels without giving much thought to it, really. Everyone's probably going to have a different way of calculating their total level and stuff in their game. So I'm just going to fire some numbers in here. And for description, I'm just going to say for the knight, a lowly knight. And for the naked, I'm going to say a naked human. Very straightforward. Okay. Apologies if you heard my Discord. I just had to mute it that time. So next, we need to do a set of gear for each class. So in similar fashion, let's make a new script. We can call this class gear. And we're going to make this a serializable script as well, so we can use this in the inspector for the convenience sake of it. So I'm going to put my namespace down, because we're going to be using things like helmet equipment, weapon items, etc., which are from the Dark Souls series, which use my namespace. Next, I am going to start by making a public... What did I even call the... We'll start by making a string. We'll start with the same thing, class name. So we get that nice neatness in the inspector. I'll make a header up here. Header, and then I'm going to put down class name, just to keep it all separated. And then I'll make another header down here. And then I'm going to say weapons. And then I'm going to make a public weapon item. And this will be the primary weapon. And then I'll have a public weapon item for the offhand weapon. And now if you want, you can even do a secondary weapon in your primary hand, which is what a lot of classes start with. So you can just do the same thing, public weapon item, secondary weapon. I'm not going to include that. It's very easy. So I'll just comment that out. I'll explain where to insert that when we move along a bit further because it's very simple. Next, I'm going to make a header for armor, and then I'm going to call upon the head equipment, torso equipment, legs, and gloves. And I can't remember what I called that. It's been so long since we've referenced the armor. Is it called helmet or head? Let me check real quick. Yeah, so it is called helmet equipment. There we go. So the same for the torso and the legs and the gloves. So the idea of this is basically when we select a class, we're assigning the stats of that class to our character, and then we're assigning the gear and the weapons, and then we're loading the gear and the weapons. It's very simple. Okay, and if you want to as well, you can even give the class a starting spell. If you want to do that, just come down here, and you could just say public spell item, spell, or starting spell, and then just assign that there. It's very simple. I'm going to comment that out because, again, if you know how to do everything else, you can do this too. Okay, so let's go over to the class selector, and right here where it says a set of gear for each class, let's make a header and call it class starting gear, and then in a similar fashion, how we did an array for our class stats, we're going to do an array for our class gear, and then you punch in the number of how many classes you have, and you just drag and drop that stuff in the inspector. Very simple, very straightforward. So if I save that now and go to the inspector, I should see that it loads up fine. So click on the class selector up here. And there we go, class gear. Let's change that to a 2. And it is not loading up. What have I done wrong? Okay, yes, I see. I didn't set it to a not model behavior, and I didn't make it system serializable, so that makes sense. Make sure you do that, or you cannot use it in the inspector. There we go. Save it. Let's try that again. Minimize that, and then come down here, and I should be able to see, yes, element 1, or 0 and 1. So let's change this to a knight again, and then a naked. And then we're going to assign our weapons. For the knight, I'm going to assign a straight sword and a shield in the knight set. And for the naked, I'll just assign a random sword and a shield. So I'm just going to click all these in here. There we go. I'm assuming you guys probably have all this too if you're following along with the Souls tutorial. And you probably have your own gear by now to put in there too, so go crazy with the classes. Knight's gauntlets, cool. And then down here on the naked, let's just give him a weapon and a shield. Okay, let's see. Butcher sword, and we'll give him the knight shield because we don't have another one made right now. That's fine, cool. Alright, now we have a way to really get these items and stats, but we're not really assigning them as of right now. So let's actually make some functionality to assign the weapons and the stats. So first, let's make a public, not public, void assign knight class. And then we'll make one for assign naked class. Now, we could just manually go in there and assign the stats again, but let's actually make a function to assign the stats in a smarter way. And I'll show you what I mean. So right above the knight class, let's go up here and let's make a private void. We'll say assign class stats, and we'll pass an integer for the chosen class or class chosen. Because if you remember before I renamed these, they were elements 0 and 1. And likewise, this is how they're going to be referenced by integers in the array. So I'm going to make an awake method and call upon our player stats manager. And I'm going to on awaken say player stats manager equals find object of type player stats manager. This is because this is how we're assigning the stats to our character when we choose a class. So assign class stats. We're going to say player stats manager dot strength level is equal to class chosen. Well, actually, it will be class stats, and then we'd open up our array, and we use the class chosen integer value, which selects one of the options in the array with the integer value. And we say dot strength level. So, for example, knight will be 0 and naked will be 1. And we say player stats manager dot dexterity level is equal to class stats. And then we say the class chosen integer value dot dexterity level. And the same thing is true if you wanted to do vigor, stamina, endurance, whatever. You just repeat this for every single stat, which is why I didn't do all the stats, because it would just be me typing up the same thing over and over again, but you guys get it. Okay, so after the assign class stats, we just will come down here where we want to, or we have our pseudocode, and we would say assign class stats, and we would pass the integer value of the knight's class, which as we can see is a 0, and I'm going to show you why, just so it's very clear. If I save this now and I go back into the inspector, and if I were to erase the knight's class name up here, I'm just going to show you. Let's go to the class stats, and if I eradicate the knight right here, erase the name, the string, watch what happens. It'll go from knight to element 0. And then the naked will go from naked to element 1. So to put it back there, and that element 0 is the integer reference that you can use to reference this in the array. So it will be 0. If you want to do it for the naked class, it will be 1. So now that we have the stats, let's assign the gear. And instead of calling the player stats manager, I'm actually going to erase that, sorry. And we're going to call the player manager instead, because as you probably remember, we can reference all of our scripts from the player manager. And we're actually going to need to get our player's inventory as well. So we can just say player dot player stats manager, because that is referenceable from the player manager. And next we need to actually assign the gear. So we would say player dot player inventory manager dot current helmet equipment equals, and then you would say class gear, and then you would use the integer value again, which is the same thing, it's 0, dot helmet equipment. And if you want to, you could even make a function like I did for assigning the class stats for assigning the class's gear. I'm just going to do it this way because this is just an alternative way to do it, and showcasing more than one method I feel can be beneficial. So again, you use the integer value, which is 0, and then do it for the chest equipment, and then the leg equipment, and then we're going to need to do it for the right-hand weapon, and the left-hand weapon, and the gloves. So because we have a multiple weapon system, I'll say, in each hand, we can support using more than one weapon in each hand, I believe it's 2 or 3. To actually assign the weapon in the first slot, we would say player inventory manager weapons in right hand slots, and use the first, which is 0, that's the first slot, is equal to class gear, referencing which class, the class 0 being the knight. We would say 0 right hand weapon, or I think we call that, what do we call it, primary weapon. If you wanted to do the secondary weapon in the right hand, you would use the digit 1. And for the left hand, just change right to left and change primary to offhand. So if you want to give them an extra right-handed weapon, do the same thing, but change it from in right-hand slots 0 to in right-hand slots 1. Okay, and then we're going to say we need to actually load the weapons. So we're going to say player dot, I think it's weapon slot manager, player weapon slot manager, yes, and then load on both hands. Load both weapons on slots, that's the one. There we go. Okay, excellent. Let's save that. Okay. Now we can copy all of this, and this is awesome. We just change knight to naked, and all we do is change the 0 to a 1 everywhere. That's it. There we go. Assign class 1, class gear 1, 1, 1, 1, because 1 is the position in the array of the naked stats and weapons, and we save that. Okay. Very nice. So let's minimize that, and this lesson is going to be a bit longer than usual. I think we still have a little bit to go. Let's go down now to the actual buttons themselves and utilize this new logic. So under the class list, we have knight and naked. We want to have it an on-click function, obviously, of assigning these classes. But we also want it to change the class when you just scroll down or select it, not just when you click it. So on the on-click, let's assign the knight class and assign the naked class by dragging in class selector and then going and using the specific class, assign knight or assign naked. But then under both, let's add an event trigger, and we're going to use on pointer enter for the mouse, and then select for the controller. And we want to do the same thing. That way when you move up and down with your D-pad or your joystick, the class still switches and you can visually see it. And if you're playing on the mouse and keyboard, if your mouse enters the class button, it switches so you can see it. So we want to drag both of these here and do the same thing for both of those buttons again. So just go down the same thing, class, assign the proper class, and then you're good to go. And we still have a few more things to do in this video, so I think we still have a bit more to do, definitely. I can squeeze in the helmet stuff too. Okay, so let's drag the class selector in here for both of these. There we go. And assign, where is it? Naked, and then assign naked. Okay, that looks good. So we actually want to do some stuff with the buttons too, the main menu buttons, because as you recall, we're actually going back to the button we've selected from when we confirm. So for example, if you confirm your hair, you're taken back to the hair button. So if you confirm your class, you're taken back to the class button. So you do that by dragging the button and saying button select. And we also want to deactivate the class's game object when you confirm, only when you confirm. So on the on click enter, deactivate the class's game object to close out the menu. And then you want to drag your button in here, and the class button, you want to say select. And we forgot to do this, but, well, I forgot to do this. When we actually click the class button, we actually need to see where we go from there. So we kind of started backwards here. So on click, we're going to want to enable our class game object menu and disable all of the buttons so we can't leave this menu until we've made our confirmation. So I'm not going to show all this on camera, but drag all of your buttons in here and just disable them or make them not interactable. And I'll do one just to show you, because if I do one, it's all the same. I'll do the rest off camera, not to waste time. So button is interactable, no. Okay, now that's all done. You want to make sure you're dragging your class in there and make the game object active, and then also choose your first class, which in my opinion, or which in my case is the knight, and say button select. So it automatically moves the selection to the button within there. And let's go back over here now, and let's change these buttons normal and selected colors so we can actually see when they're being highlighted and such. And I've made a mistake here, so let's go back into our script here and actually call loading our equipment, because right now we're not doing that. We're only call loading our weapons. So I'm going to call the player.player equipment manager, and I believe the function for this might be set to private. And yes, I think it is. So let's actually go to the player equipment manager and change it from private to public. So let's switch this up here, and the function name is equip all equipment models on start. We're actually going to change that too, because it's no longer just being called on start. We're using it in this other script as well. And in the future, we'll do it for switching out our gear from our UI screen when we press start. So let's rename that and just change it to equip all equipment models. Good to go. Make sure you're calling it down here too on your naked class. There we go. And save. All right, so next, if I go in here now and I start the game, you can see if I pick the class, it does work. That's awesome, but we can see our beard and hair through our knight outfit. We'll get to that. That's actually not a class selection screen thing, but an equipment system error, but we'll fix that nonetheless. Let's actually drag all of our buttons in here now. And when we make the confirmation of choosing our class, we want to basically re-enable all of the buttons. So I've just done that off camera, and then go back and make sure you're selecting the class button again when you've confirmed your class. So the menu closes out, and then you're brought back to the class button. So we hit the knight now. There you go. You can see it brings you back to the class button. If I choose my hair here, though, you'll see we have another problem. The helmet still persists when we try to actually change our hair, which would not be good. So we're going to remedy that as well. Now, there's a bunch of ways you can do this. I'm going to do it the simplest one, at least the simplest in my mind. I'm going to make an empty game object called helmet hider, okay? And I'm going to make a script on this, again, sharing the same name, helmet hider. And all it's going to do is it's going to save your helmet when you're in a menu where you'd be making alterations to your face. And it's going to unload it temporarily and load it back when you've completed making alterations to your face. So namespace SG, erase the start and update as is per tradition. Going to call upon the player manager for player. Going to say player equals find object of type player manager on awake. And then what we want to do is make two functions in here, one for hiding the helmet and one for unhiding the helmet. And let's make a variable for helmets or head equipment, and let's just call this helmet. Okay, so then down here we would say public void hide helmet, and open some brackets here. Helmet is equal to player.player inventory manager dot head equipment or current head equipment. Now let's actually make an if statement here. If player.player inventory manager dot current head equipment or helmet equipment does not equal null, then we're doing this. Otherwise, if we don't have something equipped in our helmet slot, it will probably give us an error. And then down below that, we're just going to simply say player.player inventory manager dot current helmet equipment is equal to null. And then we're going to reload our gear using player.player equipment manager dot equip all equipment models. And then because there's no helmet anymore, it's going to leave the helmet blank. And then down here, right below that, let's make another one for unhide helmet. And we're just going to say if helmet does not equal null, which would be the variable we have saved up there, then we're going to say player.player inventory manager dot current helmet is equal to helmet, and then we're going to say player.player equipment manager dot equip all equipment models. So it just assigns the helmet to the inventory, and then it reloads all the models. Very easy, very simple, very straightforward. So we have to use this functionality now somewhere. So everywhere in your class selection screen where you are making adjustments to something on the face, when you hit that button, so for me it's hair and hair color, make another function, and then drop helmet hider there and choose to hide helmet. And everywhere in the project where you confirm facial adjustments, so when you confirm your hairstyle or confirm your hair color, it's easy. You can just highlight all this at one time like this and then just hit this once and it does it for everything. Drag it in there and click on hide helmet. So this needs to be placed everywhere where you are confirming or finalizing facial adjustments. And then hair color, same thing. You can really highlight them all at one time. Just control click down here, plus drag this in here and click on hide helmet. Now that should be working as intended when I go back here and check, and I'm going to momentarily. Just want to look through this and make sure I got it all in there. I think I missed one. Yep, the confirmation button here. Let's put that in there. All right, so if I hit play now, and I go in here and I go down to the class, and I select the night class. If I come down to hair color or hairstyle, there you go. Look at that. The helmet takes off and then it pops back on. We're done. Perfect. Works just as intended. Might be a bit too zoomed in on the guy's face, but hey, I mean, that just comes down to preference, I suppose. Now, next, let's actually get rid of that ugly hair and beard sticking through the helmet. So down here on our player equipment manager, we want to make a section, or a header rather, for our facial features. And this is very straightforward. It's very simple. Let's make an array for game objects, and what we're going to do is we're going to hide these game objects when we're equipping a helmet. And you can get real creative. In my solo project, I hide different features depending on what I'm wearing. So like some will be like a half mask, so then I won't hide my hair. Some will be like a mask on the face, so then I won't hide the I'll hide the beard. You know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna do them all in one knockout. You can make adjustments as you need. It's very simple. So I'm going to make a public game object array for facial features. If you want, you can separate it to hair, beard, and eyebrows and hide different ones depending on what kind of helmet you're wearing. So like a half mask will not unequip your hair, but it will unequip your beard, for example. And then down here where we have the helmet equipment, we actually have to go and make an adjustment to our helmet equipment script. And what I'm going to do, what I did in my solo project is I said is mask, is hood, is half mask, or whatever. I'm just going to say hide facial features. If you want to make a bunch, it's the exact same thing, just having different options. So you can have public bool is a mask, public bool is a hood, and the hood would hide the hair, and the mask would hide the beard. You understand what I'm saying? And then you would make a depiction there, or you would apply logic, rather, in this function right here, equip all equipment models, and depending on what kind of helmet or head equipment it is, you would unequip or re-equip certain things. So I'm going to say, if player inventory dot current helmet equipment dot hide facial features, then we're going to simply everything in the array that I have up there. So that will be a for each loop. We're going to say for each game object or facial feature or whatever you want to call it in the facial features list, or array rather. Sorry, I'm actually going to rename that to not game object. Let's call this feature, and we're going to say feature dot set active false, and it's just that simple. And then you copy this for each loop, and down here under the else, if we don't have a helmet equipped, we want to reactivate them all. So let's set that to active as true. And again, if you had different options, it's very simple. You could make different ones for a hood and a half mask. It's straightforward. The exact same logic will be applied. Okay, so now that's done, I'm going to tick hide facial features on my knight's helmet. And that's all well and good. If you guys are confused with that, I can give a further explanation in the Soul series. Just let me know if you want to see like different options for masks and hoods and stuff. Let me know down below. So I'm then going to drag in my beard, eyebrows, and hair, because those are my three facial features I want to hide. Make sure you're dragging in the parent game object so it hides all the children too. That way if you change the children, it still hides everything. Like your hairstyle, for example, you're picking a different one with your creative class. All right, so down here now, let's go, and you can see if I pick the knight, there's no hair sticking out from outside the helmet anymore. It looks great. If I go here and check out the hair menu, it zooms in their face and the helmet gets removed. If I confirm, the helmet pops back on. It looks awesome. So the last thing we have to do now is actually update the stats and the stat description, which we don't even have in the scene, so I'll add that as well. So let's say using unityengine.ui, and I'm going to do this on the class selector script. What I'm going to do is add two texts, one for the strength level and one for the dexterity level. So let's call it strength stat and dexterity stat. And then I want to add a text for the class description, which we're going to have because we don't have that right now. So I'm going to say class description. And again, this is very simple. Let's make a header here for this. Let's call this class info. UI. Let's minimize that, and let's go ahead now and make the actual class description box. So as I just stated several times, I forgot to do that. So here on the middle panel, I'm actually going to enable the classes game object for a second so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to, let's just shrink this, this little, I don't know what to call this, the stat preview here. And right above the stat preview, I'll actually add a box for the class description. So let's add an empty game object. I'm going to call this class description. And let's make that half the size of this box up here. So I'll make it full first and drag it up like that. And then I'm going to kind of shrink it and bring it in just a little bit. So it's roughly the same size here as the stats below it. I'll add a UI image to it. Hold Alt and make it the full size of the box here. Call it background. I'm just going to add the frame to it again so it looks kind of similar. There we go. And now inside this, I'm actually going to add a text. So let's go over here now and right click UI text. Let's make it, let's call it class description text. And then we can make it just a little bit smaller than the frame. So if we go up here and press Alt, and then I can kind of bring in the edges just a little bit, because we don't want the text overlapping the frame. At least in my opinion, that wouldn't look too good. And then put whatever you want here, because this is going to change anyway. I just want to make sure I can see the text. So let's change that to white. Let's make it in the middle and the center. And let's change the font size to, yeah, 32 seems fine. ... There we go. Okay, and down here, I'm just going to actually change the names of the dexterity stat text and strength stat text to dexterity text. Maybe dexterity level text would make more sense. Yeah, we'll do that. So we'll say strength level text, and then we'll come down here and we'll put the level down here as well. There we go. Okay, now let's drag these variables inside the variables that we made up here. So it is strength stat will be the strength level text, and the dexterity stat will be the dexterity level text, and the class description will be the class description. Now let's actually change these when we're actually updating our class. So these functions are called on the on-trigger events when your mouse goes over or it's selected, and they're also called on the on-click events. So let's say strength stat dot text is equal to player dot player stats manager dot strength stat dot toString, because that changes the integer to a string value. Then do the same thing for your dexterity and all your other stats. And then for the class description, it's very simple. We're just going to reference our class stats. You can actually do that inside the function here where we have assigned class stats. So if you wanted to, you could put it down here like this. So you could say class description dot text is equal to, and then whatever. Or you could come over here and you could actually just do it so it will do it every time it changes the class's stats. So we can just take this here and copy this and delete this, and over where we assign the actual values up here, we can do the same thing with the description. We can say class description dot text is equal to class stats, pass our class chosen integer dot class description, and it will do it automatically for you. And now we save that, and it should be good to go. Let's hide the class window and let's test it. So press play here now, and this is pretty much complete. I can go here and name my character Seb. I can change my hairstyle. I can change my hair color. And now I can go up and I can pick my class. There we go. Naked or night. And if I pick the night, I can actually go into the hair menu or the facial features menu, and my helmet will hide and I'll get a zoom in. So there you go, guys. You got a fully functioning character creation menu. You can do a lot with this. Hope it helped out. If it did, be sure to drop a like and leave a comment. It does genuinely appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon below. And to those of you who watch this series without seeing the Dark Souls and Unity series, I suggest you check it out. A lot of stuff in there you probably will like. Alright guys, I'll see you in the next one. Talk soon.